So I want to talk about calling, and possibly this video is going to be done in two parts because I might end up going off on a tangent. But I want to talk about um, how you discover what your calling is, okay? If you are a person, and especially if you are a person who has been targeted, okay? And even if you haven't been targeted, but you realize that you're not like the other Sims around you, okay? And you begin to realize that God has set you apart for a purpose. I'm going to use my example because I can only speak from my own experience. So obviously, um, if I start from when the narratives were being done and I was beginning to be like sucked in to all the drama, all the distractions, and I later on started to discover like, okay, this is not true, this is not making sense. I started spiritually awakening. I started realizing that not only were the narratives not true, but they that when I thought the targeting had started, it was really just when it became noticeable that it was something that I really reflected on, started from way before. So then, you start to obviously align your algorithm, right? Starts to align, and you start to hear and learn more about, who you are as a chosen person. If you are an old soul, if your purpose is to come here and awaken others, okay? So you start to understand to some degree that this is probably what your purpose is, right? But then you sit down and you say, well, how am I supposed to do that? Like, here I am. I'm not someone that necessarily has a lot of connections or is like well known. I'm not popular. I don't have any money in that sense. In other words, like I don't have that influence, right? That sometimes is necessary to maybe reach a lot of people. And you start to understand that it's not always necessarily about that your presence, your light in general, is something that is so threatening to the kingdom of darkness. Just you living your life and overcoming a lot of obstacles and, believing in God and following Jesus's teachings, you are allowing others vicariously to learn more about Jesus and I guess what this world is really about, I guess, if you want to say it that way. And so I started, besides this, little by little deciphering like, okay, what is my purpose? How am I supposed to go about this? Because at the same time, I don't think that it's my job to go and like force people to believe in something that they don't believe in. On the contrary, I understand very well that if they're not on the same frequency, no matter if you yell, scream, whatever you do, they're not going to hear you anyways, right? But so I just started to notice a couple of things that were happening around me, and I started to also be drawn to certain information. Like I understand that people who normally are chosen, at the same time, you are tracked from birth. Like your frequency is probably vibrating much higher than others. So I understood this from a spiritual perspective. And the other day, I was passing through TikTok and I saw another person who started to mention Sabrina Wallace. Now, I had seen a video from Sabrina Wallace like years ago, I think when she first came out with a video, but I didn't know that she had continued like, her work of like being a whistleblower and speaking about, this kind of electronic warfare that they're doing on a lot of let's say the NPCs in this world and also the souled individuals, right? Because the things that they're doing could only function, I feel, also if this were a world that was basically like a simulation, because everything is working based on algorithm and codes and all of this, right? So it does relate, okay? And this is why a lot of people, when they're targeted, sometimes they fall into, like I said, just the electronic aspect of it, the weaponry aspect of it, and warfare of it, and they sometimes don't look at the spiritual side. And you have to look at both, because it is both. I mean, if they are doing things to track our aura or track our frequency, and they're bouncing information off of us so that they can interpret information in our body and monitor us and all of this, then it's something that's intertwined, right? And there was like one thing that she said in one of the videos, like, you better get right with Jesus. And this was one idea that I wanted to talk about, was like, you get to the point where you start to think about it, and you start to be aware how evil, I mean, because obviously all of this technology, I mean, yes, I do believe it exists, but of course it's like fallen angel technology. This is something being done to keep us trapped in the matrix, to keep our souls completely trapped, as the enemy knows or knew that we were coming closer and closer to the age where we were going to eventually, regardless, ascend. So people, well, sometimes they're not aware of these things existing. They dismiss it. But something happened this morning, again, to give me that motivation to come today and evangelize. And one of the things that had been happening, and I don't really talk about it too much, but it happens frequently. I notice when I am either doing podcasts where I'm meeting with other individuals to discuss Jesus or talk about Jesus's teachings or energy and all of this, or if I'm actually looking for jobs online, all of a sudden my computer starts to act funny, or like it starts glitching, or like you can't open this web page, or this and this happens, right? Thank God for ChatGPT to some degree, that like if it wasn't for ChatGPT, I couldn't like maneuver my way around certain things, so can't completely call AI like demonic, but it's like using their own technology against them. But the idea is that it started happening again today, and I'm like, isn't that ironic? Because like I was actually filling out an application for a job, and like I said, I'm not interested in necessarily having a 9-to-5 job, but I would like to have at least some kind of work that I can have to obviously be stable and also invest in my own business, right? So in the end of the day, there might not even be a guarantee that I get the job, but it's just that idea that the enemy, besides all of the other narratives and things I've been accused of, at the end of the day, when you see that the enemy is basically just trying to attack your very livelihood or finances so that you don't make it in this world, to do podcasts in your own house, not disturbing anyone, but to evangelize or spread the word or awaken other souled individuals, you really have to believe that, if I had been, talking about another religion or talking about another idea, it wouldn't even probably matter. But because it's related to, let's say, evangelizing and speaking on Jesus, and many Christians will tell you this, okay? The enemy goes at you hard. The enemy knows who you are, knows what God has ordained over your life, and this is why you are a threat to the kingdom of darkness. And it just made me like, and I write on my website blogs, and I have a whole blog that I'm gonna link it in the video, talking a little bit about my experience with the gang stalking and certain things that were happening. And obviously, like I said, this would not be happening had it not been that the enemy knew that I would use every ounce, of my energy to free the people in this simulation through the word of Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? So that is number one. And I'm going to make this a part 2 because the video is going to finish, but I want to also explain another situation that happened a couple of days ago that also let me know what my calling is.